Hey, so, welcome to the first LinkedIn Live conversations about the power of the innovation mindset. Created by Lorraine Marchand, author of The Innovation Mindset. My name is Anouk Pappers, and I'm a brand anthropologist, and I support women and diverse leaders to position themselves for board seats. Before we get going and discuss the power of the innovation in driving strategic growth and how board members can play a crucial role in fostering innovation within their companies, Lorraine, tell me something about you that most people don't know.
Oh, one of the fun facts. Okay,
Exactly.
Anouk, yeah, let's warm up a little bit. So, a fun fact about me is that my favorite time of day is sunrise. So, yes, I'm a morning person. And when I travel on vacation or even on business, particularly if I'm near the water, I'll get up to go view the sunrise live. And it's the most photographed item in my iPhone photograph collection. So, I'm a sunrise person and love to travel.
Okay, very good.
How about you, Anouk, the brand anthropologist? That means you've got to be very worldly, correct?
That's correct. And actually, my fun fact is also linked to travel, because I'm getting to having traveled to 100 countries in the world. I'm almost there. I'm somewhere in the 90s. And so 100 countries is one of my goals. And my next trip that I'm planning as we speak is to visit 5 countries in West Africa. So that will bring me really, really close to the 100.
All right. Well, we're going to be coming to you for a travel guide. Okay. Thank you, Anouk.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not the morning person. So sunrise, sorry, I'm not going to join you there.
You're probably photographing sunsets. I got it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So, for our first conversation of hopefully many, many more, we thought it would be a great idea if we can focus on Lorraine's thought leadership around the power of the innovation mindset. An innovation mindset is relevant, even essential in all industries, functions, roles, and not in the least, also in the boardroom. I've been working with many board members over the past years to position them in the right way to be eligible and effective board members. One of the features of an effective board member and board is the ability to think in an innovative way, be open minded, curious, bring experiences from adjacent industries, and also ask the right questions. And beyond that, it's very essential to keep learning, to have that continuous learning mindset. Because don't think that when you join a board, it's a done deal. It's only then when actually the actual work starts. And continuous learning is a very important part of that. So before I hand it over to you, Lorraine, I would like to share 3 really interesting statistics that I came across. The first one is a study by PwC. They found that 80% of boards believe that innovation is essential to their long-term success. However, only 40% of boards are confident in their ability to deliver on their innovation goals. Very interesting. The second one is a study by the Boston Consulting Group, and they found that companies with high levels of board engagement in innovation are 2.5 times more likely to introduce new products or services than companies with low levels of board engagement. And lastly, a study by McKinsey found that companies with more women on their boards are more likely to be innovative. And of course, you've been talking about, Lorraine, about women innovators. I work a lot with women on boards. And this study found that companies with 30% or more women on their boards are 15% more likely to introduce new products or services than companies with no women on their boards. So I think our point is made even before you're going to start making it. But let's switch to that innovation mindset that board members should have and really cultivate.
Yeah, well, thank you, Anouk, and I really appreciate you opening up with those powerful statistics that we all know is in the literature. And so we understand that innovation across companies, on boards is really important. And we're going to get into how you can actually implement that. But first, I just want to make a comment that as my book came out, and John Hance is on our line today too, my co-writer. So thank you for joining, John. As the book was coming out and I was giving talks and interacting with individuals and businesses, I was constantly being asked, what does it mean to innovate in corporations? How can boards help their companies be more innovative? What is our role? What is our job? And so it has really spurred some additional research on my part, more conversations to better understand what innovation does look like in corporations. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's also really fundamental to go back to our basic definition of innovation. And innovation is the act or process of bringing new products and services to market, of fostering new ways of doing things. That's fundamental. But as you know, I have a twist on that. And my twist, which I think is really important for business and commercialization, is that an innovation has to be solving a problem that a customer is willing to pay for. And that can be a financial transaction, or it can mean that we're asking the customer to change a behavior, do something differently than they've been doing before. So that's still really fundamental to the innovation process, including in corporations, and something that board members, I think, need to embrace as the definition.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for explaining that. I hope everybody made notes. So now that we all agree on that definition of innovation. So talk to us a little bit about corporate innovation. What does it mean to innovate in a corporate environment? And what kind of metrics or indicators show the impact of innovation? And maybe also, if you can share some successes and maybe even some failures. What is the price of not innovating?
So, Anouk, you've got a lot packed in there. So let's unpack it. Let's start with metrics, because it's really important that we understand what it is we're measuring. And there are at least 5 ways of measuring innovation from a business perspective. The first one is a Forbes index. And what Forbes did was they evaluated companies where the shareholders were actually bidding up the price of the stock based on their expectations of future growth. And they looked at companies that were in the billions in terms of revenue, investing at least 1% in R&D, and they looked at their stock value performance against the value, whether it was being bid up, and then how they performed over a period of time. So some of the companies that are on that index, you would probably recognize. I won't go through all 100 of them, but they are companies, for example, Thermo Fisher, Boston Scientific, Celgene, MasterCard, Visa, the list goes on. So that's one way that we can look at innovation. Fast Company has also created an index, and Fast Company's index looks at things like the equity, the share price, but they also look at the corporate reputation. They look at the reputation and the media coverage of the CEO. They look at the social networking of the company. So they have 5 different parameters that they look at in order to evaluate and determine whether a company is truly innovative. And as you can imagine, some of the leaders are on the top of that list. So Elon Musk and Tesla, Jeff Bezos with Amazon when he was still there, and then even the CEOs of Regeneron, which is a biotech company that I have a lot of experience with. So that's a second way. A third way is to say, what is the price of not innovating? Like, what market share are you leaving behind for a competitor to absorb because you haven't innovated? And there, you asked me to point out some failures. We can look at companies such as Blockbuster or Nokia or Kodak, who just failed to understand the dynamics and the changes in the marketplace and customer behaviors, that didn't innovate and left room for their competitors to come in and sweep in. A fourth way is very tactical. It's process. If we measure our processes, our resources, the number of people that we have in innovation types of roles, the patents that are being filed, so we can look at all the inputs that are going into innovation to see how active we are. And then finally, we can look at outputs. And really important in business, how many patents have we filed? How many new contracts have we won? Have our sales actually grown? What are customer stats saying about us? So those are 5 different ways that we can measure innovation. A lot of companies look at a different combination of them. There isn't just one that can tell the story.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for explaining this. It's really interesting because depending on the way or the angle you take on looking at it, you can of course be more or less innovative, and depending on the industry you're in, or business to business, business to consumer. So it gives a lot of opportunity to look at ourselves, let's say, as a company. So if we talk about these approaches and about this way of looking at innovation, what can board members take away about successful innovation? How can board members incorporate, let's say, the innovation mindset into the boardroom? Where do we start? Because, it's a big thing, and yes, we want to be more innovative. That's what 80% says, or we have to be, but still 40% of the board say, well, we're not there yet. So how can you help? What are your ideas on helping them become more innovative?
Well, Anouk, it's very true that as much as corporations wish to innovate, the role of board members has often tended to be very traditional board of director roles that focus on HR or audit. Sometimes more strategic, but they tend to have very traditional roles. But I think that's really shifting, and so boards and board members need to be versed in what I'm considering the 5 C's of corporate innovation, and think about how they can help boards become more innovative. And let me walk through the 5 C's, and then we'll go into a little detail. And then I'd love to give an example of how a board member might embrace each of the 5 C's. The
Great.
first one is chance. And by this, I mean investing in strategic risk and also managing the downside of risk. Right after chance is collaboration. Now, let me tell you that by collaboration, we're going to talk about this for a minute, because I don't mean how nicely you are to get along with. Collaboration has a much deeper, more strategic meaning than it did when it started showing up in the behaviors of corporations about 20 years ago, and you were being asked to evaluate how well you got along with your peers. Much, much more impressive definition now. Of course, we have to have customer in the middle of the 5 C's. We lead with customers first. The fourth one is about culture. That's the only way that you're really going to be able to enable true change and embrace innovation as a company, is when you change the culture, top down, bottom up. And then 5 is this idea of change. How well does the company embrace change? How well do they make pivots? When a decision's been made, does everybody get behind it and rally? Or do we have a lot of pockets of resistance? So those are the 5 C's. And I think that board members armed with those 5 C's can start to reflect and think more about their role and how they can bring the knowledge of the 5 C's into the boardroom, into their board role.
Okay, great. Well, if you wouldn't mind, can we talk a little bit more about the 5 C's? So starting with chance and go a bit more in depth.
This one about investing in strategic risk is very critical. And the reason that it's critical is we started out with the 5 definitions of innovation. We've talked about some of those powerful stats. The other thing that's underneath this is, how do you strategically invest in innovation? And a lot of companies struggle with this. There is well-known documented research, and it has led us to what I'm going to summarize as the 70-20-10 rule. We're all used to the 80-20 Pareto rule. So let me just stretch your mind a little bit. What the 70-20-10 rule shows is that corporations that have best practices in terms of innovation invest 70% in core, 20% in adjacencies, which might be some new products and new markets, and 10% in disruption or transformation that is going to spur their growth and take them into new sectors, new industries, new geographies. Now, what happens when we look at their growth curves? It's the inverse. What I mean by that is, when they invest 10% in disruption, 5 years later, 70% of their growth has come from that 10%.
Wow.
Okay. 10% of their growth has come from core, and the other 20% of their growth has come from those adjacencies. So, this is so critical. And the companies that follow this portfolio approach, the research has shown, have a 10 to 20% improvement on their price to earnings ratio versus companies or peers that don't follow this portfolio approach. So this is what I mean by investing in the 70-20-10. If you are a board member, I really encourage you to understand your company's strategy, to have discussions with them about their investment strategy, and to know where they land on that 70-20-10. This is something that you need to understand and foster a discussion around where they're investing, why, and where their growth is coming from. I think it's a great strategic discussion for board members to be in front of. I mean, the flip side of this, of course, is managing the downside of risk. Also very important to understand where the risk is in the portfolio. Is there financial risk, technical risk, intellectual property risk, operational risk? Also understand where the risk is so that you can help mitigate that, create a risk matrix and know where the hot spots are in the portfolio, and discussions around how that can be managed. So I think for board members just to reflect on this and think about whether there are opportunities in the next board meeting to have a discussion around strategic investment and managing downside risk.
Yeah, great. Thank you for explaining, because I think in many cases, I mean, I talk to a lot of board members and it's always about, risk, managing risk. And there's a lot of people who are well versed in risk, but it's always the managing risk. It's never the investing in the risk. So I think this is a great add-on, because it will set you apart as a board member, but it will also help your board and your company get to that 70-20-10 thinking. So great one. What's next? Collaboration?
The second one is collaboration. And again, this is more than just being pleasant to get along with. There is research that shows, and I'll tell you the name of the book in just a moment, but research shows that true collaboration in a company, and what I mean by that is when two or more service lines collaborate, go to market together, figure out ways to upsell, revenues increase exponentially. So think of an example where you have a product, maybe you have a help desk, maybe you have a service package around it, consulting around it. And once those three different service lines or account lines start to figure out how to integrate, understand the customer, have a unified go-to-market, revenues start to increase exponentially versus either or any of those product or service lines going to market individually. And there's a terrific book by Heidi Gardner called Smarter Collaboration, where she shows the power and the impact of collaborating. And it doesn't even have to start with the revenue producing service lines. It doesn't have, it starts there, but it doesn't have to stop there, because there's also research to show that once you start to bring in operations, HR, legal, accounting, you really get everybody in the company, including the various functions, all aligned with the customer, understanding the growth goals strategically, and everybody's KPIs have the same bullseye in front of them. Just some really terrific things can happen in a company in terms of getting aligned and driving that strategic growth.
Yeah, great. That's another way of looking at diversity as well, right? It's the diversity of backgrounds and departments, etc., and bringing it all together gets you to better results.
I think that's true. And again, for a board member to bring these kinds of questions up in the board meeting, do you understand the company and their go-to-market enough to know what are the different account lines, what are the different service lines, which ones are working together, and could some creative solutions and creative go-to-market that could drive more growth be developed if we were thinking about how to collaborate a little bit more creatively and bring in those diverse perspectives. So I think it's another powerful one for board members to ponder.
Yeah. And now we go to the center of the universe.
The center of
customer.
the universe is always the customer, customer first, customer in the center. And again, everything that we do as a business needs to be unified around that understanding of the customer. And I like to point out that customer research, customer discovery is not an event. It is not a one-time thing. It's continuous, and everybody can be participating in it. Again, I might be on the front line of a service line or bringing a new product or service to market, and I have interactions with the customer. But what if I have somebody in the legal department who's also on the front line with procurement or contracts, and they're getting other insights about the customer that I might not even know about? Someone else might be dealing with them from a delivery or an operations standpoint. And far too often in corporations, we stay in our silos, only thinking that the product person is the one with the valuable customer relationship. But that's just not so. If we tap into everybody else who's touching the customer, how much more can we learn about their goals, their motivations, their needs, and how much more powerful can we be in responding to them? So as a board member, how well do you really understand the company's customer? Have you been privy to some of the customer research? Had you had those conversations? And I think that every board member can probably do a better job understanding the customer and figuring out where that nexus is in the company and how everybody can get united around being a better service partner to that customer.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very good point. I mean, nothing to add, because without customers, we have nothing. We have no business. So that's why they always have to be center of attention. Agreed. And then we go to culture.
Yes. So the fourth C is culture. Critically important, as we know. Maybe it's one that we should all be starting with and ending with. But how are we spreading innovation? How are we encouraging innovation in the company? And I'll be pretty simple and straightforward with this. Of the various testimonials and examples that I've collected in writing the book on the kind of culture and best practices and companies that really value innovation, how do they think about culture? The one testimony that stands out is always embracing failure, making it safe to fail here. And again, I love to quote Jeff Bezos, who at Amazon really led with try, fail, learn. And in those companies that have high innovation scores, we also find that they incent everybody across the organization to innovate, to try their hand at creating new things. And they reward the trying, not just those that end up going into a marketed service or product, but they make it safe to fail. And I can always tell corporations that don't embrace that, because as soon as you sit down and start to have conversations with the employees around their ability to create their latitude in bringing change to market, you'll hear the ones that will say, well, we'll get in trouble if we do it that way. We're really not allowed. We have to do it this way. So companies have to really get behind and walk the talk and show that they're creating an environment where it's okay and safe to fail.
Yeah. Do you remember that years ago, I don't know if it's still the case, but years ago, I know that in the Google campus in Mountain View, people were allowed, let's say, 10 or 20% of their work time just to experiment and to work on things and ideas and whatever. And I mean, the best products that Google ever developed came out of that time. So it's freeing up time to innovate, to create new things. Again, whether it succeeds or not, but really giving people, scheduling, let's say, time in your calendar to be innovative and to have that time and space. That's very important.
And I think that's a really important comment, Anouk, because a lot of times I think companies think that that means that they're like throwing spaghetti at the wall or giving everybody a Friday off. And that's not what it's about at all. This idea of freeing up time to be creative and innovative, it's deliberate, and it's part of the discipline. It's part of the system and the process of innovating. So it's not by chance. It's very much designed. And it's designed to open people's minds up and give them these opportunities, but it can still be part of a very disciplined innovation process.
Yeah, exactly. Very nice. And then the last one.
So,
Change.
yeah, we've got to be able to embrace change, the agility, the resilience. In the book, I talk about the pivot. The pivot is a change in direction without compromising your strategy or your vision. And again, it's a muscle that companies need to strengthen. They need to use it in order to improve it. And so that ability to embrace change is really important. And again, if the culture is positive and embracing this idea of failing fast and failing safe, and if we're very clear with our company employees about when we are making a change, why we're doing it, maybe we're dropping a service line, changing a product, and then making sure that everybody has their questions answered, but gets behind the new plan and marches forward so that you really eliminate these pockets of resistance or silence, whatever the case might be, that can really thwart your efforts to innovate and bring about positive change when you don't have the company with you. So that's another very important one, to really show the organization how to embrace and make change. And it starts with explaining why and how you're pivoting.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thanks for explaining this. Actually, while you were talking about it, I was thinking that maybe in the coming weeks we should dedicate your next LinkedIn newsletter to these 5 C's, so that everybody who was attending today can read through them again with a little bit of explanation. So, in closing our discussion about the power of the innovation mindset for board members, what would be your call to action to people who are serving on boards, who know that they need to embrace the innovation mindset but don't know really how to start? How can they cultivate their own innovation mindset?
Well, I think it starts with exploring these 5 C's, with really understanding the problem that the company is solving, thinking more strategically and proactively about the role that you can play on the board, maybe having some conversations about where the board might benefit from your strategic input. And if anybody that's joining us would like to have a further discussion around this, particularly if you're looking to be on a board, if you're already on a board, Anouk, you and I have talked about being able to provide a diagnostic based on the innovation mindset, based on the 5 C's. So we'd be delighted to offer just a 30-minute consult and discuss a particular situation with you further as far as what you can do. And you can get in touch with me at Lorraine at LorraineMarchand.com. You can get in touch with Anouk and I on LinkedIn, and we'd love to take this conversation further. 30 minutes isn't enough time to really get into everybody's particular situation, but hopefully you've gotten a nugget or two that's worth thinking about, and have an opportunity to follow up.
Okay, great. Well, we have 2 minutes left, or we can stay a bit longer on if people have questions. If you put your question in the comments on LinkedIn, we can read them. We cannot reply by that same, but we can read the questions and give you an answer if we have the answer. And if there are no questions at this moment, then Lorraine, I would like to thank you for having me on your first LinkedIn Live, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on your thought leadership on the 5 C's and how we can use the power of the innovation mindset, let's say, frankly, in any given situation. But today we specifically spoke about the boardroom. So thank you very much for all your nuggets and knowledge that you shared today.
Well, thank you, Anouk. It's been a pleasure, and particularly given your experience and background working with board members and with boards, I hope that we can help more individuals get these innovation principles into the companies.